A very warm evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to have our panel discussion. That is going to be the panel discussion number 1. All of us, we have among us Padma Shri Dr. R.B. Groverji, Emeritus Professor of HBNI and Member of Atomic Energy Commission, who is going to chair the panel. I would request Dr. R.B. Grover to please come on the dais. Requesting Dr. D.P. Srivastava, Ambassador, retired. Mr. R. Srikanth, Dean of NIAS. Requesting Professor Suneet Singh, Head of Department of Science and Engineering, IITB, to please come on the dais. Requesting Mr. A.K. Balasubrahmanian, former Director Technical of NPCL. So we have among us the chair of the panel and all the members of this panel discussion. And the panel discussion is going to be on role of nuclear and renewables in clean energy transition. Over to Dr. R.B. Groverji.
Thank you, Prince. Well, I think I'll start with some remarks from my side first, and then give a chance to two speakers here, two persons here who have not spoken earlier, Professor Suneet Singh and Mr. A.K. Balasubrahmanian. I will start with a very simple statement. Net zero needs nuclear. I think this has been highlighted by all the speakers earlier. India has made formal announcements regarding the evolution of energy mix for the ongoing decade, but the path to be followed after one decade is still to be formed up, still to be worked out. Even in the academic domain, there's a dearth of studies for the energy mix in 2070 to achieve an economy-wide net zero. And if you compare with other countries like UK, they have analyzed cases which go beyond 500 before they have announced net zero by 2050. And we are trying to catch up now, and think some studies have been done, but many more studies are needed. This gap needs to be filled up and has to be addressed by integrating several perspectives, namely the development needs of the country, indigenous energy resource profile, availability of technologies and their supply chain, trained human resources, further evolution of policies, and associated social impacts of energy transition. And different speakers have highlighted different parts of this particular set of issues. Development on the international front need a very careful evaluation. CBAM, the introduction of CBAM, which is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism by the EU, is one important development, and it has been already highlighted by the previous speaker. But let me say that if you analyze it deeply, it is a challenge to the mantra of common but differentiated responsibility followed so far, which Srikanth talked about, referring to a Rio Declaration. The UK and the USA also are working on similar lines, ostensibly in retaliation to the EU. The evolution of CBAM by the developed country is even a challenge to the centrality of the UNFCCC mechanism for decision making. Now, this decision is totally outside, and how it will influence a country like India, I think has been talked about earlier. the developed world could come up with some other tools as well to retain its pole position in global economy. The Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, on 7 December in a statement called CBAM as non-moral. I think this reminds me of a book, Kicking Away the Ladder by Ha Joon Chan of SO, School of Oriental and African Studies by University of London, which was published in 2002 and received attention worldwide, several awards. The basic theme of the book is once developed countries have reached their present status based on certain policies, but now they want to kick away those policies. They do not want the developing countries to follow those policies. Example of CBAM and similar phasing out of fossil fuels is an example before us. The example which he has quoted, Professor Chan has quoted in the book, is high degree of protectionism, which was used by the developed world throughout their growth period, wide use of subsidies, heavy regulation of FDI, a lax IPR regime, and manipulation of policy framework at WTO in their favor. And now all those policies are being challenged by them after they have followed it for several years. These developments lend urgency to evolve an energy mix that is predominantly based on low-carbon energy technologies that are mature today. I want to stress upon the word that are mature today, and whose supply chain lies by and large within the country. Research, of course, has to continue to develop technologies for the future. In this panel discussion, we'll be focusing on nuclear and renewable technologies. By nuclear, we essentially mean fission technologies. Hydrogen will have to play a key role in decarbonizing and hard-to-abate sectors like steel and cement industries. Estimates for the final energy consumption, that is FEC, have been made in some academic studies, including one done by my group, rather essentially my PhD students, to have HDI of 0.9 and in an economy-wide net zero scenario, the final energy consumption in India in 2070 will be about 3 times or above as compared to what it is today. About 60%, that is about 14 to 15,000 terawatt hour, will be used as electricity, and the rest will be in the form of hydrogen. Some hydrogen will be produced by biomass, urban waste, etc., and to that extent, at some by water, by electrolyzers or thermochemical splitting of a group of countries led by the USA, including UK, France, Sweden, Finland, and South Korea, and this has been referred to by Professor Srikanth earlier. The pledge is to triple the global nuclear installed capacity by 2050. They have said that revival of nuclear power was critical for cutting carbon emissions to near zero in the coming decades. Well, as already spoken by CMD, NPCIL, and other speakers, India will be tripling installed capacity much before 2050, maybe by 2030, 32 in that time frame. There are enough academic studies that bring out the role of baseload electricity generating technology from the point of view of grid stability. Even IEA has published one such study. Implications of high share of intermittent technologies on the tariff at the consumer end have also been brought out. I use the word consumer end, and this is very important here. There's a difference between the scenario at the generator end with consumer end, because in between the consumer and the generator lies a grid where one has to balance the demand and supply, and that has to be done by providing storage, as highlighted by Ambassador Srivastava. I think that is where now we are finding costs are becoming very high. And very early in the game, renewable energy talked about what they say socializing the system costs. and so that they can say we are very cheap. And in the process of socializing, what has happened in India, all discoms have gone bankrupt. Implications of high share of intermittent technologies on the tariff and the consumer end have also been brought out. In India, some years back, the way to manage the grid in case of a shortfall in electricity supply was to switch off some feeders, leading to load throw-off in targeted areas. Even now, some load shedding continues, and it continues even in cities where we need 24/7 electricity, which are the heart of computer industry, information industry like Bangalore or Gurgaon. And there, all industries are having backup supplies. And think of the investments which is being made by all these companies in backup supplies because we do not have a reliable 24/7 electricity supply. Now the Central Electricity Authority has formulated resource adequacy norms, first time in the country. It has been done just a few months back. This has highlighted the importance of storage, and all the studies which are now coming, first was by CEA in the month of June, and now Power Minister has made statements that storage will be 10 rupees plus 4 rupees, total 14 rupees will be the tariff from solar or wind. The cost of storage is now coming out high, and this kind of remarks are coming now from all policymakers. Well, I think NPCIL has formulated a very ambitious new build programs, but only for 1 decade. I think whatever current today morning was Mr. Pathak spoke about, that will be over in 1 decade. It's time for them to have a second plan for second fleet of 10 reactors, which can come up between 2030 and 2040, because there's a lot of pre-planning is needed in site acquisition, taking various clearances. So it's time to start thinking about, getting approval for a fleet of 10 more reactors, which will come up after this current fleet is over, or maybe concurrently with this current fleet of 10 reactors. I think NPCIL has also ideas about 220 megawatt design, which can even have a steel line containment. This will need a smaller exclusion zone. I think many of you must have read the news about the cancellation of the order placed on Messrs. New Scale for 6 SMRs. Again, this was spoken about by earlier speaker. They were to construct this 6 SMRs in Idaho, but the utility to which they were to supply, they have canceled the order because of rise in cost. Citing this cancellation of order, the share price of New Scale crashed, and there were headlines like reality fractures, next-gen nuclear fairy tale. Well, I think I will like to make a statement here. Considering the 220 megawatt design of NPCIL, we have our own SMR. Of the various 80 SMRs which have been listed by IAEA in their book on SMRs published 2 or 3 years back, one SMR can do 300 megawatt by a Canadian company. So similarly, we should, whatever changes are needed, make those changes, and our 220 megawatt is also an SMR. It's an SMR for which design is known, for which supply chain is available, for which operators are fully familiar with the details of operation. When one thinks of SMRs or micro-reactors, one has to consider certain basics and issues which arise from those basics. Here, I like to differentiate between SMR and AMRs. SMRs are reactors which are based on PWR technology, essentially, and trying to make small unit size. And advanced modular reactors, AMR, a term coined by UK recently, When we talk of totally advanced concept like molten salt breeder reactors or triso-coated fuel with gas-cooled reactors, they are AMRs. Initially, when this SMR idea was to develop those reactors. Somehow, because of, I do not know how it has happened, because of pressure of industry, or it has totally transformed to thinking in terms of LWR technology itself, not the new technologies, which was the thinking earlier of nuclear professionals. So when we think of these SMRs, which are smaller version of pressurized water reactors, their compactness results in higher surface to volume ratio. Compactness means surface to volume ratio is high, hence higher leakage of neutrons and of thermal energy. This results in lower fuel burn-up, increased volume of waste, and lower specific heat production. Integral reactors are also likely to be more difficult to inspect and maintain due to their compactness. There are another set of studies which come from this premise, higher surface area to volume ratio. But those studies, one is a published paper in PNAS, other is a report by Argonne National Lab, and two studies are opposite to each other, but I like to quote both of them. SMR designs invoke neutron reflectors and elevated fuel enrichments to counteract the adverse effect of their small size, which a small size has effect on core reactivity and fuel burn-up. These design changes have important consequences for spent nuclear fuel and low and intermediate level waste management systems. And the paper published in PNAS is by Kroll et al. Nuclear waste from SMRs. They have analyzed 3 SMRs, IPWR by NuScale, 400 megawatt MSR, and 30 megawatt MSR. And this analysis of 3 distinct SMR designs shows that relative to gigawatt scale PWR, they will increase the energy equivalent volume of spent nuclear fuel, long-lived low and intermediate level waste, and short-lived LILW by factors as high as 5.5, 30, and 35 respectively, which is very large. These findings stand in contrast to the waste reduction benefits that advocates claim from advanced nuclear technologies, but this has been challenged by NuScale. NuScale has even contested the methodology used by them. So a study by Argonne National Lab published almost simultaneously, it has different results. They say this spent nuclear fuel arising will be only marginally high, and they are saying that in case of natrium, which is a sodium fast reactor with molten salt energy storage, and high temperature gas reactor, which is a pebble bed reactor with triso fuel, waste will be less. So I think one can see contrasting studies, but this Argonne National studies, when they say that natrium and STGR, they will, as per the definition which has been, which UK has come up, they fall under the category of AMR, which was the original idea of nuclear engineers when the idea of SMRs came up. Let me close by saying that both existing and new reactors are necessary for India and the world to achieve economy-wide net zero. We should rely more on indigenous technologies. Our energy needs are very large, and we should think about deploying reactors whose economics is already proven. For a very small reactor, economics is going to be challenging. I think one has to differentiate between financing and economics. Financing of small reactors will be okay because their total cost will be less, but economics, that is tariff which will result, that will be high. Well, I think then we also have to consider that our requirements are very large. As I said earlier, that our estimates, which are similar to some other estimates, we need to increase the electricity generation many-fold as compared to what we have today. And we also have to recall that Central Electricity Authority claims, and this claim is true, that they have extended grid to all parts of the country. The idea of microreactors saying that they will be applicable to remote areas, the question which I want to ask is, what are those remote areas? And I get only answer a few places. One answer comes as Lakshadweep, second answer comes as Andaman and Nicobar, third comes as Leh and Ladakh. As compared for Ladakh, the government has already sanctioned a very large project for taking the grid there so that they can install solar cells there and get electricity there, and that grid can be used at all places. For Andamans, these microreactors will be of no use because government wants to develop that as a transshipment hub. There we'll need these microreactors will be of no use. We'll need at least 220 megawatt kind size of reactors. So that is what we need there. And Lakshadweep Island is too small to have any reactor. So I think when we talk of microreactors and remote areas, we should first find those remote areas which we need here. So we have invested heavily in the grid, and grid has been extended to all parts of the country. There may be small village, rural hamlets where grid doesn't reach as yet, but otherwise grid is now reaching everywhere. So for niche applications, will be economics will be a problem. For remote areas, grid can reach there. So perhaps microreactor is something which we should debate more. Do we really need them? And SMRs, well, one has to look at economics, and we should think in terms of AMRs for those applications which we are not this light water reactors where I think we might have difficulties. And we should not ignore 220 megawatt design of NPCIL for these purposes. Thank you. I stop here, and I'll now request Professor Suneet Singh to come and say a few words. Yes, you can come here. If you want to speak from there, it's okay.
So good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Indian Nuclear Society, for inviting me to this panel discussion. I'm seeing that we have like 40 minutes left, and there are more than 4 people to speak, and then discussion also has to be there. It is a panel discussion. So I will try to keep my remarks brief, try to do it in less than 5 minutes. So I will start with my experience. I see that the topic of the discussion is role of nuclear and renewable in clean energy transition. So I was doing BTech in electrical engineering at MNIT Bhopal. And from there, I just decided on a whim to do MTech in nuclear engineering and technology at IIT Kanpur. And after that, I went to US for PhD in University of Illinois. And at that time also, in around 2001, people were talking about nuclear in ANSA. So that thing keeps coming up, going down again. Hopefully, this is the time where nuclear takes a central role. So after doing PhD, I joined IIT Bombay in Department of Energy Science and Engineering, and I got an opportunity to work in various areas of renewable energy as well. So I think I get a unique perspective about looking both at nuclear and renewable energy together. So if you think about renewable energy, there has been huge transition in the last 10 years. Obviously, it is an ongoing transition. If you see 10 years back, people used to come when I joined this department, and the question was, what is this Department of Energy Science and Engineering? I mean, that question itself was quite difficult to answer, that what do you exactly do in energy science and engineering? Now IIT Delhi has a BTech program in energy engineering, IIT Guwahati has one, and IIT Kanpur has a sustainable energy engineering department. They are going to start a BTech. So that question has now gone. What energy engineering is, what energy, importance of energy transition is, nobody has to explain. So if you think in terms of renewable energy, there has been huge transition, ongoing transition, In last 2 years, suddenly everyone is talking about hydrogen. And one interesting thing which happened, after Fukushima, nuclear actually went down quite significantly. For some years, nobody was talking about nuclear at all. In last 2 years, again, as soon as hydrogen came up, maybe slightly after that, people are again talking about nuclear as well. And reasons are quite obvious. If you go to renewable energy, the problem of intermittency is huge. We do not have a base load and dispatchable source with renewable energy. So alternatives, if you see, for example, Germany closed down all the nuclear power plants, and this is the only country in Europe, except maybe Poland, which is not able to shut down their coal power plants. Because either you depend on nuclear or coal, you cannot shut down both of them together. So if you want to transition from coal, nuclear is only base load available. And countries like India, which are heavily dependent on coal, at some point of time, we have to transition to nuclear if we want net zero. Second thing is renewable. When we talk about renewable, the alternate solution is storage, which is basically batteries. Cost is one issue. Somebody can claim 10 years back, solar PV used to have huge cost. In 10 years, it has fallen dramatically. Same thing can happen to batteries. They can become a solution. But are batteries clean? That is another question, I think, because it is a new transition and everyone is talking about it. Nobody is looking at what is a battery, whether renewable energy may be clean, but are batteries clean? So if you consider all those questions, then it seems that without nuclear, that transition is not going to be possible. And that has been recognized throughout the world. And that is why the world is again looking at nuclear energy as one of the major sources, not only today, in at least foreseeable future. So looking at the perspective as from my department, looking at various areas, that is kind of a given. Same thing, hydrogen, when we talk about hydrogen, we talk about green hydrogen, clean hydrogen, but nobody has any solution. Electrolysis has been proposed as one of the solutions. Dr. Grover already pointed out 9 terawatt hours of electricity is needed for that. And electricity, where it will come from? From renewable, from coal. So what is the solution? Again, even in hydrogen, nuclear hydrogen can be one of the solutions because instead of electrolysis, we can go for thermolysis. Again, all these are options. I'm not saying the solution exists, but if you see, renewables will be there, but nuclear has to be a part of the solution, and that too a significant part of the solution. So I think the panel discussion today on role of nuclear and renewable in clean energy transition is a very good point to discuss, very apt topic for today's conference. Thank you.
May I request Balasubrahmanian to say something?
Thank you, Dr. Grover. Good evening to all of you. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much. Well, the whole day we have been listening to the inevitability of nuclear power in realizing the dream of energy transition in the future, in the near future. We also heard the overwhelming targets in terms of gigawatts, hundreds of gigawatts, and the short span of time in realizing that, in materializing that. So I am reminded of a quote told by a leader from another industry. He mentioned, execute, execute, execute. That is the need of the hour. In fact, I really agree with this because the call for nuclear fraternity is also the same, execute, execute, execute. And now, having set the targets for the current decade already, and as Dr. Grover mentioned, we need to prepare ourselves for the next 2 decades with higher targets. So we need to have, I will add, plan, plan, plan. That's what is the real need. In this context, let me share a few words, a few thoughts on the standardization of implementation. The standardization word has got different perspectives. At the moment, I will talk about one perspective which perhaps needs a little more attention and review and assessment as to how we must proceed with that. See, there is a lot of interrelation between site selection, site evaluation for adequacy for implementation of a nuclear power plant, and these two have a greater ramification on the detail engineering or the plant engineering. See, when we say we have a design today of 700 megawatt, which functionally meets all the requirements, and the first plant is operating at 100% very satisfactorily, and the next few plants also will operate. Now, that's not enough, in my opinion, because when you go to a new site, you get a different set of parameters in terms of geotechnical and seismotectonic parameters. These are parameters which have larger impact on the detail engineering. Detail engineering is actually the nuts and bolts of the real engineering behind the screen, behind the curtains. You will not even realize how time flies in finalizing that part of it. You may lose a couple of years from the day you get the data and by the time your drawings are ready for construction. Many a times we have resorted to concurrent engineering and supplying drawings to meet the schedule of construction. Sometimes it doesn't work. So is it not better for us to prepare ourselves for this aspect? So here, there was a thought, and there must be a thought in NPCL as well now, to have what is known as an enveloping design, to considering a larger number of sites, potential sites, the data of which may be available at least preliminarily, you arrive at an optimum envelope of site-specific parameters which could be used, which can be used to arrive at an enveloping design. Enveloping detailed engineering, and the drawings are available. The drawings are required both for construction as well as for manufacturing. Drawings and specifications. Now, once you make an enveloping design, once the parameters are available to you, it is only necessary to show that the enveloping design or enveloping parameters are a superset of the actual site-specific parameters. So thereby, in the context of regulatory clearance, we can take a certification for an envelope design, and for every site, we need to give only certain specific data, something similar to the ITAX of US NRC regime. So this is a very feasible thing. Now, there is a catch in this still. Today, the availability of sites is not very certain. Now, when the sites are allotted after site selection to the utility, that is NPCIL, they start looking at the site and then start evaluating the site parameters. So, can we think of a paradigm shift here? That is, the enveloping parameters, site parameters, are given as a guideline to the site selection, and as much as possible, such sites should be allotted to NPCIL. So you may not agree with this. There are a lot of other bottlenecks. This is not the forum to discuss that. But I would like to leave this thought in the minds of the NPCIL and other units to think about it, wherein we give the enveloping set of sites parameters as a guideline for site selection. If not feasible, those sites will be attempted a little later. By the time you can complete the re-engineering or additional engineering required to qualify that. So you don't lose time the moment sites are allotted to NPCIL. This is one thought. Now, as I said, regulatory clearances can be obtained and kept ready so that the site work can commence immediately and only hold points will be required to be adhered to. Well, that's the main point that I wanted to tell. Now, with reference to the SMRs, Dr. Grover mentioned about our workhorse, like the 700 megawatt, which will become a workhorse in the future. We have a very beautiful design, very robust design with design, construction, and operation. I must say excellence because of the 962 days of continuous operation, etc. There is an excellent product available which can be utilized with minor tweaking. For example, we may provide, of course, this is my personal view, we may provide a steel liner, we may have integral calandria and shell assembly which can be assembled outside and brought. To some extent, it's a modular design. And such minor things can be worked out. And here again, the issue of different sites will come. So I feel for this purpose also, there should be an enveloping design for which we may not be required to change much of the design, but qualification has to be done for the structures, systems, and components for those parameters. So this aspect can be useful, this whatever paradigm shift which I am talking can be used for in the context of 220 megawatt SMRs also. Well, lastly, this topic was already discussed, but I thought I was thinking about this. We have 23 reactors, a fleet of operating reactors, and some of them are actually aging, in the sense 30 years, 20 years, 25 years, like that. So it was also brought out by CMD NPCIL how we are prepared to take care of the life management and life extension. There is a need, perhaps, a need will arise perhaps in the next decade to have a more focused strategy with respect to life extension. Because today we are talking about 40 years. Definitely, I believe the kind of robustness, the kind of margins which are built in these designs, we can go up to 60 years. So there may be a certain more additional efforts to streamline, to firm up the strategies required to extend this life. For example, the large amount of data that is available from the operating reactors need to be analyzed to arrive at optimum life extension strategies, along with safety upgrades to meet the required safety standards. Well, I think I have touched upon 2-3 points. We may be able to deliberate later about this. Thank you very much.
I think the other two persons have already spoken earlier. So now we throw the topic for questions to the audience so that then we'll answer those questions. Who will start? Yes, Dr. Kantayat. Can someone give him the mic?
On the definition of energy itself, all along we have been talking about electricity as the form of energy.
Can you come forward? Come forward. I think there is some problem with the acoustics. Nothing is clear.
Okay. We have been talking always about energy in form of electricity. In the decarbonization process, a lot of industries, they require only thermal energy. For example, in the chemical industry sector, the total energy requirement on the average, 40% thermal and 18% electrical. Now, in the recent, and DAE has got, I think, there a lot of experience in supplying steam to chemical plants, as in the heavy water plant and the RAPP. So this kind of a model will be able to utilize the nuclear energy for a whole cluster of chemical plants with steam supply.
Yes, I think when we talk of economy-wide net zero, one has to think of all these aspects. So process heat for many industries will have to be provided. A nuclear reactor can do the job, as we have been doing in Kota to the high water plant supplying steam there, or desalination plant in Kalpakkam. So that model has to be expanded. Maybe Bala, you will like to add some more to this? But otherwise, most of the application and most of the end uses have to be electrified. This change has to come in the industry. Okay? Any other question? Anyone want to add further on this?
So for low temperature process heat, there is possibility of using solar thermal as well. But several places, solar thermal availability can be an issue, and then high temperatures can be an issue. Even hydrogen production with thermolysis is a kind of process heat only. And there has been idea of actually load following using hydrogen production, using thermolysis. So there are industry-wide applications, means not necessarily for electricity. Electrification is one option, but even wherever thermal process heat is required, some of these ideas can be used using nuclear or solar thermal. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, please. Can someone reach the mic? Can you introduce yourself?
Sir, I am Hemant Rao from IGCAR, Kalpakkam.
Can you come forward again? I think problem of acoustics in this hall.
Sir, good evening, sir. I am Hemant Rao from IGCAR, Kalpakkam. Sir, this is related to deployment of SMRs or other reactors. Because morning onwards we are discussing that by 2031 we are planning to increase more than 15 gigawatt, and also by 2050 and 2070 we have a lot of plans. Now what should be the timeline where we put on our 220 megawatt SMRs, if at all PHWRs, or future we say Gen 2 or stage 2, sodium cooled SFRs, and also we talk about thorium. So what are the timelines we will incorporate in our structure so that we can work with a plan and we can work with a focus teams?
Well, I think whatever I know, I will suggest that first of all, as I said earlier, we should plan for one more fleet of 10 reactors of 700 megawatt immediately, so that we can take it up in parallel to the current fleet. With regard to 220 megawatt as SMR, I understand that there have been some requests from certain steel and aluminum industries. They want to think in terms of setting up 220 megawatt reactor, and this dialogue at the moment is at preliminary stage. It will, as we proceed further, we will know, because this dialogue has just started, so it's difficult to make a comment as to what timeline it will need. But industry is showing interest because of implementation of CBAM by EU. Okay. With regard to advanced reactors, while we currently implement 220 megawatt, we must develop advanced modular reactors so that we can have Gen 4 technologies. And BARC already has a plan to develop molten salt breeder reactors, and Kalpakkam, you are working on fast reactors, and I'm sure after PFBR goes critical, you will have further plans and you will be able to move on. Anyone you want to add something, Bala?
Only one small point.
Yeah.
See, 220 is a already available design with a lot of experience. Now to develop a new design using a different technology, whatever Dr. Grover mentioned, in my opinion, it will take good amount of time by the time it is available for implementation. See, the concepts will come in a year or two, let's say, but the detail engineering, qualification, regulatory clearance, everything put together, it takes quite a good amount of time. So I would say it may take typically 8 years to 10 years for any new reactor from scratch to be developed and ready for implementation. So that's the time scale. Once that is available and a couple of reactors go in operation and satisfactory feedback is there, then the game will change. This is what I wanted to say.
So we should continue our R&D to develop more designs, but we should immediately, since the climate change is reality now, we should implement what we have and then work on further designs.
Sir.
Okay, yes, Mr. Yadav.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Sir, actually, it is well known that to meet the net zero requirement, we must have a lot of nuclear reactors. So it is good here, but what about the sites? What about the site where we are going to locate the thing? That is one question. What is the thought process going on? And second question, in fact, there was a webinar earlier that many thermal power plants are getting retired. Those sites are available. What is the thought process that those reactors can be put into those sites and those sites can be utilized? These are two questions.
Yes, sites for nuclear reactor is going to be a challenge, but first I will request Srikanth to comment on this. He already spoke about location of SMRs. Do you want to say something? I think you can say, then I'll add my views are little different from his views, so I'll come later.
Okay, thank you for the question, Dr. Yadav. See, the study that we have done for BRNS very clearly indicates that we have done all the work in accordance with the guidance given by BRC, by AERB. We are very sure that there is 40 gigawatt of capacity available in thermal power plant sites at various parts of the country. If the exclusion zone can be reduced to 500 meter, the envelope sites further increases, and we are able to get another 30 gigawatt. So that report has just been submitted to BRNS. I think it should be in the BRNS Secretariat today. So therefore, the report is already available for the DIE to study and take action, and we have very clearly given all the required details that actually enables site assessment to be done immediately. So that work is already done. The point what I actually feel, so sites are available. The point is that are we prepared to accept those sites? What are the enablers required to mobilize those sites? Because I don't want that report, we have worked very hard on that report and a lot of people, and I don't want that report to be just basically another report to be put on the shelf and forgotten. There are a lot of enablers that are required to basically mobilize these sites. And the fundamental enabler is amendment of the Atomic Energy Act. If we don't do that, I think it is all going to be stillborn, because those sites are not, most of them are not owned by the central government. They are owned by the state government, they are owned by, some of them are owned by IPPs also. And therefore, there needs to be the business as usual, waiting for a site to come and land in our lap will never happen. It has reached its limits. What the private sector does is different. The private sector goes and scouts the site, takes hold of the site. Whatever difficulties are there, they will overcome those difficulties and put up the plant. So I had personal experience of how things have happened, that how more dynamism is required. I really admire the professionalism and the excellence of all DIE personnel. The only thing what I feel is our requirements are so high that business as usual is going to be self-defeating, that we are going to be still in that 3%, 2.5%, 3% range, because the growth in electricity in India is going to continue, whether nuclear power is there or not. So therefore, the whole question is, business as usual cannot continue. Sites are available, but those sites require a completely different level of skills in handling the media, in handling civil society, in handling the state governments. That's a completely different ballgame, which will take many, many years if NPCL has to do everything on its own. So what I'm only saying is, as I told, India requires 20 NPCLs, but all these NPCLs need not be government-owned. They can be also private-owned. They can be also state-owned. I think we need to be open to that idea that unless we do that, we will not have sites. Enough sites to basically reach those goals that we need to reach.
Okay, let me add some more to this in this regard. Only last month, I had a dialogue with a very senior person of NTPC and asked him how many sites can you make available for nuclear power plants. His response was nil, because we have been asked to add more thermal capacity, so we have no sites which we can spare for nuclear power plants. Now, I find that with regard to state government, I do have no idea. They may have some sites. So sites is a problem for us, and we have to work hard to locate more sites. And limitation, to what extent we can increase installed nuclear capacity, limitation is going to come from sites. Yeah, please.
Well, let me start by saying that I think I made it very clear in my presentation also that the most fundamental issue facing India is ramping up generation capacity, because we are at a very low point of our development trajectory. Now, ramping up generation capacity at such pace requires huge resources. For that, we have to have an open mind. One idea which Dr. Srikanth has suggested, amendment of Atomic Energy Act, I would support that. You have to be careful, AERB will have to have an NPCI and DAE will have to have a overarching role. Private sector has dynamism, but of course there are safety issues. But we have to bear in mind the kind of resources needed. According to our studies, $11 trillion, which is about $220 billion per annum. And of course, if you have time, you can go through our study. We had kept most of it back-ended, knowing that Indians move slowly, but the nature is moving faster. So I don't think we have time that completely changes the paradigm. Now, again, coming back to resources, what is this EU CBM, which is to equalize the cost of carbon. Carbon cost is about 80 to 90 euro per ton. Once that is being applied, it will change the matrix. Now, Finance Minister's statement, which was a very valid statement, why should, India have, the developed countries are trying to green their economy by taxing the developing countries. So the G20 statement also had a reference to having some kind of carbon tax here, but that again pushes up the cost. Well, let me start by saying that I think I made it very clear in my presentation also that the most fundamental issue facing India is ramping up generation capacity, because we are at a very low point of our development trajectory. Now, ramping up generation capacity at such pace requires huge resources. For that, we have to have an open mind. One idea which Dr. Srikanth has suggested, amendment of Atomic Energy Act, I would support that. You have to be careful, AERB will have to have an NPCI and DAE will have to have a overarching role. Private sector has dynamism, but of course there are safety issues. But we have to bear in mind the kind of resources needed. According to our studies, $11 trillion, which is about $220 billion per annum. And of course, if you have time, you can go through our study. We had kept most of it back-ended, knowing that Indians move slowly, but the nature is moving faster. So I don't think we have time that completely changes the paradigm. Now, again, coming back to resources, what is this EU CBM, which is to equalize the cost of carbon. Carbon cost is about 80 to 90 euro per ton. Once that is being applied, it will change the matrix. Now, finance minister's statement, which was a very valid statement, why should, India have, the developed countries are trying to green their economy by taxing the developing countries. So the G20 statement also had a reference to having some kind of carbon tax here, but that again pushes up the cost. Something like $150 or $200 billion import bill. So $1 increase in oil price means increase in oil import bill of 12,000 crores per annum. And, last year or so, we have seen $10, $15 has become the norm. And as we edge towards the end of the oil age, there will be more inclination of oil-producing countries to squeeze as much value for their asset as possible. So why I'm referring to this is that if you keep this arbitrage in mind, the cost of investing in nuclear is not that high, but for that, a decision has to be made by government, and there has to be a realization that we need a much higher order of energy, electricity, and in a shorter time. And the answer again is we come back to you go with the known technologies. SMR, I'm not ruling this out, but this is after 10 years. You have to survive the next 10 years. And the same thing applies to hydrogen. It's not a silver bullet. 5 million ton of hydrogen requires 125 gigawatt of electricity, 2/3 of our current renewable energy production. So we have to look for what is the bulk of our requirement and what is the cheapest way of meeting it. And that is only, I'm not an expert on CCS, coal with CCS, or otherwise, go with the indigenous nuclear reactors, whatever is already proven, 220 and 700. We should have an open mind to modify or amend the Atomic Energy Act, because again there's a choice between your development trajectory, which will definitely be affected, and choice between a little higher capital cost and tariff in case you allow other players to come in. Now, before you allow outside, the foreign vendors, and you have to allow the Indian private sector. And the foreign vendors also, why UK and UAE have allowed them? They are capital rich because they are tapping their capital cost. And their formula is contract for difference. That is a long-term tariff guarantee to attract investment. And given the nature, the size of the scale of the investment required, I think we have to keep all options open. But the easiest thing, the first thing to do is to ramp up nuclear on the basis of proven models which we have, that is 220 and 700. And of course, the organizational changes at least have 2 NPCIL. I'm talking of government NPCIL. That is possible within the, you need more manpower apart from the money.
Sir, two quick
Yes,
questions.
Mr. Yadav.
Sir, one question.
Okay. I think first let us give chance to some new person. Yeah, please.
Sir, my name is Vinay Khanduri. I represent Nuclear Business Platform. Sir, two quick questions. One is regarding 220 megawatt technology. It's a very interesting technology, and PSWR is quite interesting in the sense that in terms of safety as well as cost, because whatever accident have happened world over, it's not attributable to PSWR, and then in terms of cost, it's multiple times lower than other nuclear technologies. So as far as you were mentioning about 220 megawatt reactors, so will the design be the old 220 megawatt one, or will there be some element of 70 megawatt as far as systems are concerned? And my second question is regarding export part of it. In terms of...
It's okay.
Yeah.
We'll answer this question.
If I understood correctly, you're asking if we adopt this 220 megawatt as an SMR, whether we will go for some changes, changes in line with the some of the advanced features of 700.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So that passivity increase and the CDF level goes down, so that we can have wider number of sites to locate these SMRs.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I mentioned this. The 220 megawatt design as such is a very robust design, and we will not like to change the fundamental features of that, because as I said, anything that you start, it has got a cascading effect in the detail engineering. So we will. My personal view, of course, NPCL will have a separate view, perhaps. My personal view is something like, we can look at certain features. For example, the containment liner, which is very vital in the leak tightness of the containment, and thereby it helps in reducing the exclusion zone radius, number one. Then we can look at the manufacturing and some kind of modularization without actually changing the engineering part of it. So I gave an example of the reactor vessel. Certain amount of assembly can be done outside and it can be brought inside. Having said that, again I am repeating this, the detail engineering will have to be qualified for a wider spectrum of site parameters so that you can go on implementing very easily when you get a site. Does it answer your question?
Thank you, sir. And one more question, quick question, sir, regarding export part of it. Now, as it has been mentioned that, now 220 megawatt will be used for export purpose also. India is now a big country. Of course, it was a big country, but in terms of impact, it's so obvious now. So India can use it as a strategic lever. So is it causing
I think there's an echo coming. You have to come this side.
Is it fine, sir?
Just make it short because
Sure.
time is already
So my question was regarding, sir, export of 220 megawatt. So are we working on some time frame on it and volume? What sort of volume we want? Because kind of, South Korea has planned to export something like 10 reactors by 2030.
Export issue is a little complicated. Whenever any country exports to a other country, particularly developing country, they always look for loan or debt at very low interest rate. Now, this is something, there are two aspects here. Technical issues, yes, NPCIL can handle along with the vendors in India, but when it comes to financing, providing debt at low interest rates, that is a decision which Government of India has to take. So I don't think any one of us here is in a position to answer that detail. For example, when we have purchased reactor from Russia at Kudankulam, interest rate has been negotiated at government to government level, a large amount of debt and all those things. So those issues are, I think, beyond any one of us here. Technically, yes, Indian industry and NPCL together have that technical capability. Now, Mr. Yadav, I didn't
Yes, sir.
allow you. You can continue with your question.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for all the answers to my first question. Certainly, it is well established, beyond doubt, that India, if it had to continue to develop, we need nuclear power, and nuclear power in big numbers. Certainly, I think there is a need for a policy decision making, taking all aspects of the nuclear, that we need the fuel security, sites, manpower, finance, managing the things. I hope some broad level, some study must be going on. I don't know what is the status. Maybe you can like to throw some light on this.
Now, this is all I can say is discussions are going on, but I'm not in a position to share them in this forum.
Okay, sir.
I leave
Right.
it at that.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, one of the things I think we have sort of, I want to make 2 points. One point is about sites for 220 quote unquote SMR, okay, whatever it means. There are, I think, NPCL itself can put up 25 or 30 quote unquote 220 megawatt SMRs. And I will tell you how. You look at any power plant site of NPCL, Kudamkulam, Narora, Tarapur, in most of those cases, or rather in all cases, land has been acquired for a 1.6 kilometer exclusion zone. Therefore, there is a huge amount of vacant land that is available in every operating nuclear power plant in the country. So therefore, without actually going outside and requiring new sites, the best and fastest way that NPCL can do to increase capacity is to basically modify the 220 with the huge amount of technical expertise they have, get it certified for a 0.5 kilometer exclusion zone, and utilize the surplus land that is available inside the site to basically increase the number of nuclear power plants. And therefore, that is a demonstration of the 220 megawatt. I think that is something that NPCL can do, provided, basically, of course, capital availability is there, number one. Number two, what I feel is that we have also forgotten, I think, one of the main things that we have actually gone for this 1, 2, 3 agreement and the successor agreements that we all signed. It is basically for fuel. One of the main reasons is fuel. The second main reason, all our civilian nuclear reactors, except a few, are now under international safeguards, and therefore we are, and our entire fleet mode program, I think, is dependent on imported fuel. The whole question is that we can't forget that there is a dependence on imported fuel. And the advantage of basically getting an imported reactor, even if it is more costly, is the fact that we are able to get foreign capital. Kudamkulam is a classic example, that we are able to get a long-term, low-interest loan, and that is basically enabling us to put up 6,000 megawatt at a single site, and 4,000 megawatt of capacity under construction. Out of 7,500 megawatt total NPCIL, 4,000 is only at Kudamkulam itself. So the point is, we are talking about scale. The question is, what is the scale? So I always feel that we have to increase our ambition. If we don't increase our ambition, we will not be able to basically go towards a low carbon development. I think that is what I would like to say. You can do 220, enough sites are available. You can do large plants because demand is also there. So I think the simple thing I would like to say in India is dil mange more. That's what I would say.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir, myself, Vijay Chaudhary, I'm from NPCIL. Yeah, thank you, sir. So, myself, Vijay Chaudhary, I'm from NPCIL. So, NPCIL, we are having 3 models with us, like 220, 540, and 700. And these are well demonstrated models of PSWRs. Now, any of the model can be deployed. So, basically, like if we are having our stable and a strong grid capabilities in our country, so looking the constraint of site availability, land availability, as well as the public acceptance to the nuclear, so which one will be the better options, like for going for a higher, like say 700 megawatt or beyond that one? That is the first thing. And second thing is like whatever the studies has been carried out, that is the energy mix approach, that is the renewable mix with the nuclear. So whether we are operating on the base load, whether in future, whether in the studies, variable load kind of the component has also been considered with the renewable energy. So these are the 2 aspects I would like to hear from you.
Will you answer or do I ask? first part, variable part I will answer.
I think, Vijay, what I understood is between 220, 540 and 700, what is the option you are telling? Is it not?
Looking at the land availability and public acceptance, these constraints, if I look, and looking the grid stability or the strong grid in our country, so the deployment of which reactor, the high power reactor, that is the first thing.
Well, Avi, with respect to, I don't know exactly what studies have been done with respect to grid stability, but today the grid stability is not a very big issue with national grid being available. So the land required for 700 or 540 or 220, there isn't much difference. If you really go into the details, the land required at present, without, with the same assumption of exclusion zone if you take, they are more or less same. So I would prefer that, yes, we will go for the highest capacity. That's why I mentioned 700 is our workhorse, which we, close our eyes and go on implementing. This is our one strategy to add capacity. But why we discussed about 220 is in the context of smaller areas, not smaller areas, the vacant sites, which otherwise were occupied by coal-based or other fossil fuel, where we have certain requirements with respect to reduced exclusion zone and various other factors. So there is an opportunity to implement 220, and the requirement is also only to that tune. They don't need a bigger reactor there, right? It's more of captive power plant. So that part is very clear. But variable thing,
I think with regard to load following, how do we take care of that? We know that we need hydrogen for industrial use. And at the current level of technology, this hydrogen has to come only from electrolyzers. We don't have high temperature reactors at this stage. So one can do an optimization study where we have nuclear reactors, renewable sources, hydrogen electrolyzers, and battery storage, and design a system such that whenever there is a mismatch between demand and supply, extra supply goes to electrolyzer for production of hydrogen. Since that hydrogen, as it is we need for industrial use, we have to generate that hydrogen. Electrolyzer can be located at locations where hydrogen is needed so that transport and the storage are not the issues. So this optimization study we have done, and it is possible to integrate, optimize this kind of a system where you don't have to flex nuclear reactors or curtail renewables. This study has been completed, but it is yet to be published. This answers your question here. So now I think we come to the end of the question. I'll address three issues which were raised in a different way by earlier speakers. And Professor Srikanth, accommodating 220 megawatt at existing sites of NPCIL, this idea is already under consideration by NPCIL because of if the exclusion zone becomes half a kilometer, it is possible. I've already heard it in informal settings, people in NPCIL thinking about it. Secondly, you made a remark that integrated energy policy published in 2006 talked about 63 gigawatt by 2032. That 63 gigawatt had certain components. The indigenous components will be achieving. The remaining component was reactors in collaboration with foreign vendors. There is no progress apart from whatever is at the Kudankulam site. Why there is no progress? You highlighted issues, CLND, viability, public perception. CLND issue, main issue is viability. Since those reactors are not viable, CLND issue is being raised as an excuse. Let me explain it in detail. On the nuclear liability front, we have Paris Convention, we have Vienna Convention, and since US position was not compatible with both Paris and Vienna Convention. They advocated a Convention for Supplementary Compensation, CSC, which India also has later on joined. Now, between these three conventions, there is a difference. You use the word harmonize with IAEA. IAEA has harmonized with CSC. IAEA has already accepted what we have presented to them, that it is harmonized. They have no objections have been raised. And legal experts on nuclear liability have called objections raised by US as oxymoronic, because their own law has several differences from laws in all other countries. I have myself quoting from that paper. The first, it was written by one Evelyn, some second name I forget, and I have quoted that in my own commentary published in Progress in Nuclear Energy in 2017. So, essential issue with regard to foreign reactors is viability. After dialogue, we are not able to ensure viability of those reactors. I think unless somebody wants to add something, we close here. And yes, okay. Thank you, and thanks to INS for arranging this panel discussion and giving chance to all of us to share our views. Thank you very much.